Hi guys! If you've watched any of my recent videos, you might recognize this girl. She's my tutorial head and face that I created for my Anatomy Hacks How to Draw Faces video. And this is sort of a continuation of that video, but one where I'm going to talk about hair. I don't really have any anatomy hacks per se in regards to hair, but I do have a few tips and tricks. Before we get into this, all of my tips are based on illustration work and are not attempts at realistic portraits. If you're looking to learn how to draw realistic hair though, I will include a link to Kirsty Partridge's tutorial down below, but if you do a YouTube search for realistic hair, you will find a ton of really great videos. Tip number 1, draw the head first. For that matter, giving them a body in general is a good idea, which is what I'm doing to my floating head mannequin girl. Start with a good base. Don't just draw a face and tack hair on top of it, because the proportions will most likely end up weird. Hairlines do vary, especially between genders, but typically a good place to start is halfway between the eyeline and the top of the head. You can then raise the hairline depending on the character. Connie Britton, for example, has a smaller forehead, whereas Uma Thurman has a larger one. No shade towards either of these actresses, they're just examples of how much foreheads can vary. Also, as a sub-tip, hairlines are not just curves over the face. There is a shape to them, and they are fairly flat along the forehead. Hairlines are another thing that vary a lot, so do look at reference to see how much they can change from person to person. Which brings me to the next tip. Tip number 2, look at reference. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard this one, but it's hard to draw what you don't know or have familiarity with. Look at stock photos, celebrity photos, and fashion magazines. When I was learning to draw hair, I watched a heck of a lot of anime and I read a ton of comic books. Yeah, neither are necessarily realistic, but it will prepare you for my next tip. Tip number 3, don't overcomplicate things. The problem with hair, or eyelashes, or even eyebrows, is that often we have a tendency to want to draw every single strand. The issue here is that, yes, hair is made up of hundreds of teeny little strands, but there is a form to it, and it is better to define the strands later when you're adding values so that the hair doesn't just look like, well, a bunch of scribbles all over the head. If you focus first on the details on the individual strands and you just draw a ton of them coming out of the character's head, then you'll end up with floppy spaghetti hair. There won't be any interesting texture or shape to it because you didn't first consider the flow and movement of hair. Tip number 4, start by drawing very simple shapes. They don't need to look nice, they don't even need to look like hair. Focus on flow, on the overall composition of the piece. Figure out how you want the hair to drape around the figure, if at all. If your work is less realistic, don't be afraid to be stylistic with how you form the hair. Let it float around the character, let it create movement in the piece. Hair catches the wind and does all kinds of crazy things. Take it from someone who regularly gets their hair caught in the car door. Tip number 5, hair grows outwards. It doesn't all grow from the top of your scalp and fall downwards unless you've got some kind of a limp mohawk. Each strand grows from a different spot on your scalp and it grows outwards from the source. Depending on your hair texture and length, it will then either fall downwards on its own weight or it will become an afro. There are a myriad of ways people style and present their hair, so once again, I suggest looking at reference to get ideas how you would like your character to have their hair, grow out of their head. There's also a ton of hairstyles, not to mention bangs and partially shaved haircuts. Tip number 6, add detail towards the end. Once you have the basic shapes and the hair is actually growing out of the head in a fairly believable fashion, that is when you can start focusing on the details. When it comes to adding detail, you want to add interior lines to imply where the hair groups together or to define the way the hair is curling or moving or overlapping. You can add hair strands separate from the main bulk of the hair to give it even more movement and texture. Again, you don't need to define every single individual strand. Especially in illustration work, being sparser with your lines is often more effective. When I use an Art Nouveau-inspired style, I often don't have any interior lines within the hair at all. All the detail is reliant on the curling and overlapping lines I create. Tip number 7, or just don't add detail. Often a lot of the definition can be accomplished during the coloring process. Especially with afros and other incredibly curly hairstyles, you might want to rely on how you add value and tones to define the curls so they don't look too stiff and flat from the line art. I don't personally draw eyelashes at the moment in my art. I haven't found a way to add eyelashes that I particularly like, but if I ever figure it out, I will do a quick video discussing it. But as far as eyebrows, a lot of these tips I've mentioned apply to those as well. Draw the shapes first so you capture the mood and emotion of the character, and then add the detail later. But adding too much detail, especially in an illustration piece, can make it look like you've put hairy caterpillars on someone's face. Oh, and another thing about eyebrows, they might grow straight up kind of towards the beginning where they start at the bridge of the nose, but the rest of the eyebrow hair tends to curve only slightly upwards. It also doesn't grow horizontally side to side either. So yeah, those are my 7 tips for drawing hair. I hope this has been helpful. Do you have any favorite ways to draw hair? Let me know down below. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a like, and I hope you'll subscribe too. I create art-related videos every Friday. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!